Nice. Okay, so like I said, I'd like to get started with some introductions. So like I said, we're joined by two very special guests today, Laura and Cameron. Um, Laura is a teacher, an art teacher at a Brampton school, so she's here to really offer that perspective, an educator and a school teacher. And we have Cameron here today as well, who is an artist, an educator, an actor. So I'll let each of you just give like a really quick introduction of yourself, just so we know who's joining us in the room today. Laura, if you'd like to go first, and then we'll pass it off to Cameron.
Hi, my name is Laura. I'm an elementary school teacher. I've been working with Field for 20 years now. I've taught everything from kindergarten to grade 8 as a classroom teacher, but I've also worked in the schools as a planning time teacher. I've taught drama, dance, and visual arts as a planning time teacher. And right now I'm in this amazing role up at Aylesbury Public School, and I'm working as an art teacher all day, every day, which is what I absolutely love. And I teach children from grade 4 to grade 8, and I see over 500 kids a week. So it's a really busy, but lots of fun. And I'm really excited about this program because there's nothing better to inspire kids than to meet artists and work with artists and see what they're doing. So I think this is a great opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura, and thank you so much for being here. We can pass it over to Cameron now.
Hey everyone, my name is Cameron Grant. I'm an actor and a theater creator, director, playwright from Brampton. I grew up and went to school in Brampton, trained in Mississauga, and I've gone on to be an actor in theaters across the country. Right now I'm in Regina, but I'll be back in Brampton later in the fall. Um, my role here today is to provide some examples of workshops that you can bring into schools. A whole other part of my career is working in schools, working with young people and in communities and with theaters to build and facilitate workshops that are for youth. So I'm really excited to share this sort of aspect and how this can be a whole other aspect of your arts practice, building out a community and a network of arts education workshops.
Nice. Thank you, Cameron. And we're really looking forward to hearing your examples and hearing about your experience. And myself, my name is Amanda. I work at the Brampton Arts Organization as the Education and Community Engagement Coordinator. So working on this project here, as well as some newcomer programs. And I'm also a visual artist, and I have a background in arts ed as well. So you're in good company today. All right, what are we going to cover today? So we'll take a look at the program. We'll just do an overview of some key details, eligibility for artists and programs. Cameron's going to take us through some examples of what a project could look like. We'll talk about what is expected of artists and organizations if you're accepted, and what the selection panel will be looking for when you submit your application. And then we'll take a deeper dive into the application. We'll look at the actual JOT form application. We'll go through that together. And then there will be time at the end for some questions if you have any. Okay. And like I said, this will all be recorded and made available. We'll email it to you following the presentation. All right. Okay, so what is the program all about? So this is a pilot program. It's the first year that we're doing this program, and it really serves to address part of BOW's strat plan. So part of our strategic plan for the next year and a half is to invest in artists and creatives involvement in schools and to provide artistic experiences for Brampton students. And so this program really provides funding to artists and collectives to go into schools and deliver programs for free to schools. So we're removing that barrier of the financial barrier that a school might experience to provide those artistic programs for students. And it really allows students to participate in those programs. It is focused on Brampton schools and specifically K through 12 schools. So we're looking at elementary and high schools in this case. We're not focusing on universities right now. This program is specifically for 6 to like 18. And the goal is to really reduce barriers to arts participation and skill development for Brampton students themselves, and to also provide Brampton artists and arts organizations with program delivery support. So thinking about paying yourselves, paying for materials, paying for transit, and that in a way also provides paid artist opportunities for folks. Some key details for the program. So with this project, you can receive up to $1,500 for your project, whatever you're proposing. The deadline to apply is Sunday, August 18th at 11:59 p.m. and we'll look through the application later on. And this year, we're really prioritizing projects that engage and connect students through artistic creation. So we really want to see students be involved. They're really active in whatever project or program you're putting forth. And we're also prioritizing projects that provide training or skill building that support students on pathways to creative careers. So thinking about BOW's goals as an organization, we really want to support artists on their journeys to careers in creative industries. For this point here, we're probably looking at like high school students that are interested in pursuing an arts career, and how could you support them in that work. All right, moving on to eligibility. So who can apply? So this call is open to independent artists, artist collectives, and arts organizations. You must reside in Brampton if you're an individual independent artist, or if you're an art collective, your lead applicant must reside in Brampton. And same for arts organizations, you must have a Brampton address for at least a minimum of 6 months prior to the application. You must be 18 years of age or older. You must have experience leading workshops or programming for youth audiences. So because BOW doesn't really have a lot of oversight once you are accepted into the program, we're really counting on artists to like take the lead with these workshops, from like planning to administration, facilitation. So we're really looking for artists to have experience, or organizations, sorry, that have experience leading workshops. And you must be willing to provide a vulnerable sector check to your school, or if you don't have one yet, you must be willing to obtain one. And that's just standard policy for working with youth and vulnerable populations, but those are all a must when applying. And in terms of the project that you can propose, so we're looking for these programs to be delivered to Brampton K through 12 schools. So we're looking at the Peel District School Board and Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board, and they must be offered to schools at no cost, so completely for free. And they should take place between September to December 2024. So we're hoping to wrap up all of these programs by the end of the year. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning or when you're in conversations with teachers. For your program, you can offer up to 3 engagements, but you must offer at least 1. So that's something to keep in mind, especially when thinking about your timeline, like how many can you fit in between September to December, but also consider, the type of program that you're going to offer and what makes sense. Do you need 1? Do you need 3 workshops, right? The project must be accessible to schools and take into consideration safety within the space. So thinking about your needs for the program that you're gonna deliver, are you asking for things that the school can provide? And are you making sure that, your materials are safe? You're not gonna go into a school and teach oil painting with turpentine, right? So just making sure that you're always being safe and taking into consideration space, materials, allergies, all of that. You must follow any Region of Peel Public Health or school board mandates as they arise. And ideally, these workshops should take place at Brampton Schools, but they can take place online or offsite where appropriate. So we would love for artists to really go into schools. It makes it much easier because then schools don't have to think about transportation and busing. But if there's a reason why the program needs to take place online or it needs to take place offsite, for example, maybe you have a ceramic studio and you want students to use pottery wheels, like you can't really bring that into a school. So if it makes sense for you, you can offer the program offsite. There's just, you just need to explain that in your application. Okay, so looking now at the programs and what we're looking for, we already kind of talked about this, but we're looking at projects that engage and connect students through artistic creation and professional development. So again, we really want to see students involved. You know, think about yourself as a student. How exciting would it be to have an artist come into your classroom, right? Like think about that novel experience um, for a young creative. And then we're also looking at prioritizing projects that, once again, really provide that professional development for young artists and support them in learning and pathways to creative careers. So thinking about how to self-tape for an audition, how to prepare a portfolio, stuff like that. Some examples that I'll put out before turning it over to Cameron. So when we're looking at this program, it's really open to all artistic disciplines. I know I just gave some performing arts and visual arts examples, but it's really open to anything from like literary arts. It could be about writing, could be focused on fashion, textiles, craft, and even the entrepreneurship side of art, right? So if you want to lead a workshop on how to sell your work online or turn your drawings into prints and sell them, like all of that that's related to the creative industries is amazing. And we have some examples here on the side. I'll read through them really quickly because Cameron's examples are much better. But really quickly, just to give you an idea, you could do a dance workshop, could be cultural if that makes sense to you. You could host an exhibition, so it doesn't have to be workshop focused, right? It could be like an event. But with that in mind, once again, we really want to see student involvement. So if you did do an exhibition, could you have a selection panel made up of students from the school? Could they help you install the work? Could you lead them through like a design activity to create like a poster? So we really want to see students involved and provided with some professional development if that's possible or part of your program. It could be a spoken word showcase or poetry slam, be a beading workshop. And we already kind of went over this, but it could be a professional development workshop. So like a 3-part portfolio clinic or something where you choose work on the first workshop, second workshop, you talk about how to present it, and the third workshop is peer reviews or something. So yeah, those are some examples, but I'm going to turn it over to Cameron now, who's going to take like a deep dive and actually use some of his past experience as a case study.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Just on this slide here, we have kind of an overview of what I'll try to cover. And I'll probably talk for around 10 or so minutes, and I think we'll have time for questions towards the end. But as Amanda said, throw them in the chat if they come up and you don't want to forget them. Yeah, so as I said before, I'm a Brampton-based artist. I was born and raised in Brampton and started my career as an actor in Brampton. But my career of almost 10 years now has taken me across the country as an actor, a director, and a playwright. And I started to explore arts education when I was working in the acting ensemble at the Shaw Festival about 4 or 5 years ago. I worked there for about 4 years, and I really took an interest in the work that the education department was doing. So often school groups would come and they would see the shows, and We would arrange workshops for them to engage with either before the show or afterwards. They would have post-show talks with the artists. So I would start to just sit in on them and observe how the artists led the workshops. And eventually I started leading the workshops. And then, of course, when the pandemic happened and theaters closed, we all kind of had to pivot. And I kind of joined the education team there, and we started delivering workshops into schools virtually. So we would go into Zoom classrooms and help out drama teachers who were trying to figure out how to teach drama online all of a sudden. And I would go in and offer monologue workshops and working with different texts. And I really loved that. And so that kind of really started my this whole sort of side business of my career of working in arts education. And from that, I've gone on to develop and facilitate over 50 workshops, both in person and online, with schools across Ontario. And so I'm kind of bringing that experience into this information session here. And I think what's really exciting about being an artist and transferring your arts practice into arts education is that it's an opportunity to interact with young people, to share your passion with young people. It's an opportunity for me to reinvestigate parts of my craft, to articulate what makes me passionate about acting and theater, and then kind of distill that into a very clear message to then pass on to young people. And I find that every time I lead a workshop or every time I'm developing a new workshop or adjusting it and then facilitating it, it's an opportunity for me to clarify my practice. Reminds me what about my work is interesting and what makes it sort of passionate to me. And it kind of forces me to go back to the basics in the way of my craft of like, okay, what is that thing in my process that I'm actually doing when I'm breaking down a monologue or when I'm taking on a new character? And then how do I articulate that and then pass that down in a clear way to the audience or to the participants that I'm working with? So that's really exciting to me. So let's go into some examples. Next slide there, Amanda. So some of the workshops that I like to do, I'll take you through three of them. My first one is breaking down a monologue, and there's a little bit of a description there. This is a workshop that I mostly offer to high school classes. It's kind of an intro to monologue work. If you're not familiar with theater, a monologue is like a solo piece of text. So when an actor or when a character talks for roughly a minute or two or more, but with no dialogue, just them talking a singular piece of text. And so monologues tend to be the sort of go-to way to audition, in acting training, and especially in high schools and drama classes, as a unit, often it's sort of the exam or final piece, because it's a way to just sort of solely focus on one actor and see the choices that they're making. So it can be sometimes a bit of a daunting process to take on a monologue, to memorize several minutes of text on your own. So this workshop is really created to offer an intro into that work. And so I work with the teachers beforehand to choose appropriate pieces, or if the class already is going to be doing a monologue, sometimes the students have already picked their own piece. And then I bring in exercises that carry the participants on a journey to building a character, to setting the scene of that monologue, and then making really specific acting choices. Those monologues kind of open up, or these exercises kind of open up all of the choices available to them as actors, so that they can then take those exercises and apply them to their own pieces if we're working on different pieces in the workshop, or do those exercises again as they're preparing on their own, and take that learning away for themselves. The next slide. Similarly, I also focus on Shakespeare's verse. So this one gets a little bit more intensive on Shakespeare and his body of work, but more specifically on verse text, that iambic pentameter that can be so daunting at first when we first encounter it, sometimes in English, and we're reading it and people don't understand what it means, and people don't understand how to follow the rhythm. And maybe you have an English teacher who isn't an actor and it just plays the tape, and suddenly it's boring, suddenly it's hard. This workshop helps to sort of demystify all of that through group exercises and through individual exercises. The participants kind of get a brief but very intense overview of how to make sense of Shakespeare's verse. And again, I work with the teacher beforehand to select pieces um, that are appropriate for that class, for where they're at in terms of how much they've engaged with Shakespeare. An English class might be different. If I'm going into an English class, maybe I'll use a piece from the play that they're actually studying. If I'm going into drama classes, I might provide several different pieces from plays that they might be familiar with, and stories that they might be able to connect to. But really, the goal is to use physical, analytical, and intuitive exercises to give actors or to give the participants different entryways into understanding Shakespeare's verse. There's no one way into entering this work, and some people get really sort of jazzed up by getting analytic about it, and that's a possibility. And then some people really need to physicalize it, and then some people just need to just try to speak it. And so I try to offer a variety of different exercises that will allow for that. And then in the other workshop that I offer, next slide, this one's writing through curiosity. So as I started to, I wrote a play a few years ago that has toured across the country virtually through carousel players. It's been seen by about 10,000 students and teachers, and it's a play about Chloe Cooley called Meet Chloe. And as I wrote that play, and then as it started to tour and found some really exciting success among young people, I started to be asked to come in to speak about the play and about my writing process. And then people would ask me, "Oh, can you lead my class through a workshop?" And so I kind of developed this workshop through that experience. And it's called Writing Through Curiosity, because for me, my entryway into telling a story is always something that I'm curious about. Whenever I sit down to write, it's because I'm curious about something, a story, an event, something that I've encountered, and then I kind of say that it haunts me until I can figure out how to write it and put it into a play or into some sort of text of some kind. So this workshop is all about leading participants through the writing process, or sparking the writing process through some sort of entry point of curiosity. And it's literally taking what is around us, what is physically in the room in front of us, and turning those into stories. And I really love this workshop because I use these exercises, these writing exercises as a playwright to write plays. But when I'm teaching this process, when I'm teaching these exercises, the participants find it useful in writing songs, film scenes, short stories, poems, spoken word. So we can really go in all different directions. And when people share back what they've been working on, we have various different writing styles and writing modes present. So that's really exciting because it can be applied to different writing interests. So I think the thing for me, the next slide there, that sort of connects all three workshops, and when I'm building and facilitating a workshop, my style is all of the workshops kind of follow the same structure. So I kind of offer to you, like, what's your style? Think a little bit about how you structure your workshops. So for me, the rules of engagement are important when I'm running a workshop. I always articulate begin a workshop by articulating the kind of ground rules or the rules of engagement that I would like to be observed. So that could be something practical, like, we're working with materials that might require a certain sort of safety measures or whatnot, depending on what your workshop might be. Sometimes I use balls, little hacky sack balls that participants use in some of my exercises. So being clear about how we use those respectfully. But more important, like the ethos, is that my workshops always require the participant to kind of jump in to fully engage. I kind of ask people to go out of their comfort zone and try something new. And then to also kind of put it on the line. Of course, acting is a very public thing. So, you're going to be in front of people. You're going to be speaking out loud. People might at times be watching you. And so I kind of ask my participants, I kind of put that on the table to the participants and say, hey, this is what it's going to be. And if you trust in the process, then it'll lead us to here. And I'm kind of asking you to jump in with me. And I find that when I start my workshops that way, or when I build around that ethos, that kind of builds the trust between me and the participants. And then I think another sort of key aspect of my style in terms of building a workshop is that they're really exercise based. So instead of sort of having one activity that sort of progresses over the course of the workshop or that we add on steps to, I offer several different exercises, several different entry points, as I was kind of talking about with the Shakespeare um, uh, workshop, several different entry points into understanding the concepts that I'm asking the students to engage with. And for me, always in the background, I always write down what the learning goals are and what I think what the outcomes I would like to be from that workshop and from each exercise, so that I can kind of gauge whether or not the students are getting there, or if I need to add in a different exercise, I might need to swap something out because they're further ahead than I expected, or maybe it's taking them a little bit more time to grasp this concept. And so my next point is that participant feedback is really encouraged in my workshops. After every exercise, we stop and the participants get the chance to offer feedback and to say, okay, what worked for them? Maybe what didn't work for them? What do they think this exercise is meant to elicit or to bring out? And they share those as a group to each other, so that even those who don't really feel comfortable sharing can make connections and make their own connections to the learning. And then I think the last thing is that I'm always going in with the perspective of offering a toolkit to the participants. So this exercise or this workshop will give them the opportunity to build a toolkit. Of course, you don't always need all the tools in a toolkit when you're attacking a new project or when you're attacking a new monologue, a new piece of text, right? You use what you're comfortable with. You use what's necessary. Sometimes you reappropriate tools because you like it so much and you rather just use the tool that you like than use something else. But the point is that you have lots of different options that then you can pick and choose, and that the participants can go away with a whole series of exercises or ideas to engage with and continue that learning on their own. Next slide. So just some things to consider more practically when you're building your workshops. Really think about what is filling the gap within the curriculum. So that's where I find it really sort of helpful to articulate what the learning goals of your workshop will be, because then you can draw those connections to the curriculum. And I'm sure Laura will talk about this, but then when you approach teachers with your workshop, it's a little bit easier to say, okay, this is how my workshop, this is how this arts practice will fit into the work that you're already doing, that already needs to be taught within your class. Often my workshops, as I said, are sort of brought in as introduction units to Shakespeare or to monologue units within high school drama classes. I mostly just work in high school drama classes. And then even my Writing Through Curiosity workshop has been used in English classes. And then a lot of high schools have these special high skills major programs that require workshop certificates. So the students who are in it need to sign off on like 3 workshops or 4 workshops outside of classes. So your workshop could fulfill that requirement as well. So as you're building them, be aware of that. And if you start as simply as going to the Ontario curriculum, it's all online, reading through and just seeing where your content might fit. And even if you're thinking outside of the box, a nice resource is Math Through Music, Joseph Cardi. He teaches math through music and DJing, right? So it might not just be as simple as you just going in and talking to a drama class like I do. You could bring your arts practice into math, into science, into another subject, and find a nice connection there. And I'm sure that's really exciting for teachers. Think about your workshop as something that shakes up the day-to-day of the class, right? Like somebody new is coming in, a new energy, a new chance, a new opportunity to engage with material, a different perspective. My workshops really demand that everybody gets up on their feet. We're up, we're down, we're moving around the room, we clear out the classroom. So really think about how you're going to be changing up the day-to-day of the class and really articulate that when you're reaching out to teachers, because that's what's really exciting, right? It's kind of like the kids are going on or the students are going on a field trip within their own school. Workshops that allow participants to meet the artistic practice in a way that's accessible to them. So this is really, for me, I only offer my workshops to high school students because the content that I'm working with and the engagement level that I'm working with kind of requires a certain level of experience or understanding that kindergartners won't have. And that's totally fine. Your workshop might fit better within a certain age group, but just be aware that, you know, the difference between a grade 3 and a grade 5 is kind of great. Same with a grade 5 and a grade 8, or a grade 8 and a grade 10. So instead of being too broad in terms of what you're offering in your workshop, really focus on what you want to teach, and then what might be the best age group to teach that to, and what might be the best level of experience to teach that to. So if you're a break dancer, and then two, if you're a break dancer, like, not everybody's going to be physically able to do all of the things I'm sure that you can expertly do, but how can you whittle it down to make sure that you're meeting the student who is physically gifted in a way that yeah, they just jump in fearlessly, and then that student who's a little bit more timid, who really kind of wants to stick to the side steps and the two steps. How can you make sure that the workshop sort of is accessible to everybody in the class and meets a range? Great. And then sorry, the last one there is that workshops that don't require too much support from the teachers. And I guess by this, I mean like content support. So remember, the teacher's bringing you in as the expert, right? They're, of course, going to be there to supervise the class and to step in when needed. But I find that teachers love to kind of jump into the workshops. They want to actually be involved in the same way as the participants. And it's great to get the teachers involved too, because if the teachers are involved and the students can see that the teachers are involved, I often take part in the exercises that I do, so the students can see me and the teacher being just as silly and giving just as much energy as I'm asking them to bring in. So give the teacher that opportunity to be involved in the workshop, and not to feel as if they need to be your second hand or your assistant in the workshop. I find that works most successfully. And part of that is making sure that all of that pre-communication around materials, anything you need beforehand, if you need things printed or need things to be posted online so that the students have access to it before the workshop, that can be done beforehand. And then also remembering that not every room will have access to space or computers. So if there's something that's essential to your workshop, making sure that the teacher knows that beforehand so that they can book the appropriate room. I always say we need an open space. So that can mean we either push the desks away or we move to a whole new space completely. But just making sure that the teacher has all of that information beforehand so that we're not wasting any time in the workshop, but that nobody's really caught off guard and being in a space that we weren't expected to be in. So those are some things to consider. The last thing I'll offer on the next slide, Amanda, is that if your program goes well, you get to the end of the summer and you're like, yeah, this is great. Really consider looking into the Artists in Schools and Communities and Schools project grants at the OAC. This project with BOW is really great because you can literally copy and paste this project into a grant from the OAC into this program, and you can also use this as an example to speak to its success and how you will expand it. This program offers up to $12,500 to do this kind of work in schools and communities, and they have a priority to get into communities and work with artists outside of Toronto. I've sat on the jury for this grant and the selection committee for this grant. There's a lot of resources that sometimes don't get used. A lot of people from Toronto apply, and so they're actively trying to get into the GTA outside of the Toronto area. and other areas of Ontario to make sure that those resources are being spread out more evenly. So really consider applying to this after your project with BAL is done. And that's all I've got for you. I'm sure if there's any questions, I'll be around afterwards to answer some more.
That was great. Thank you so much, Cameron. Like, so much good information, and I love that you threw in this slide. Yeah, what a great like idea to take this project if you're successful, or even like if you go through the exercise of writing this application, even if it's not successful, but you know you want to try doing this program. Oh my God, yes, submit it to OAC. And I like that you mentioned a lot of folks from Toronto apply, but not a lot of folks from like outside of Toronto, and they really do want to prioritize people in Brampton, in Mississauga, in smaller communities that aren't often funded. So that was a great time. Thank you. Yeah, and lots of great feedback in the chat. Thank you, Cameron.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, and like Cameron mentioned, there'll be time at the end too if you want to like ask more questions about those programs. Cameron and Laura will be here too at the end of this section for the Q&A. Okay, I'll try to move us through the rest. We have about 15 minutes before we go into questions. I'll try to keep us going. Okay, so let's say you submit your application. It's great. We decide to fund your program. What comes next? So what's expected of you once you receive, once you're accepted, sorry. So you'll be required to deliver your selected project within the program's timeline and budget. So you will provide us in your application, which we'll look at in a moment, your like selected or suggested program dates and your budget, and of course your description for your program. You are responsible for the full administration and facilitation of the workshops. So why is that underlined? Because BAL won't be setting up artists or accepted artists with schools. It's really on the artists themselves or the organization to make those connections with teachers or principals or book those workshops essentially. So you're responsible for all that project coordination, setting your dates, as Cameron mentioned, making sure that the school is aware of like any materials or space needs that you have. Really all that coordination for your program falls into the administration. And then you'd also be required, of course, to deliver the workshop. You'll also be asked to provide regular progress updates to staff, and all that means is really once you're accepted, we might reach out and say like, hey, how's it going? Where will you be leading your workshops? Do you have your dates confirmed? It's really just us checking in. Otherwise, we don't have a lot of oversight on the programs. It's really in the hands of the artists. You'll also be expected to provide a vulnerable sector search or check to the school. So we won't be collecting those, but anytime you work with the school, and Laura can probably attest to this, you have to submit that vulnerable sector check as well as insurance, and that's something that you'll take care of with the school. And you'll also, for BAL, you'll be required to fill out a closing report, and that really just asks for like how many students you worked with, which schools did you work with, any feedback or like testimonials from folks, and really anything else you'd like to share. It's really simple. It's like a page worth of info, and it's all mostly staff. But we'd like to like record and also celebrate all the great work that you've done. So that's really where that closeout report comes in. Okay, so what is the selection panel looking at when they're reviewing applications? So like all of our applications and programs, really, we want to prioritize artists and arts organizations from Brampton and in Brampton. So that's definitely one of our priorities. We're also looking at your artistic experience. So within your creative discipline, your experience working with those mediums, and your experience leading and facilitating arts programs for youth in particular, so 18 and under, and school audiences. Like I said, BOW won't have a lot of like, we won't be at your programs. We won't have like oversight once you receive the funding. It's all you. So we want to make sure that you have that experience before, going into a school. We'll also be looking at the quality of the proposed project that's provided to students. So like what Cameron mentioned in his proposal, you're really looking at like filling in the gaps. You're thinking about what you could offer to schools that might relate to curriculum, might provide a new experience for students. That's something that we'll be reviewing as well. And the feasibility. So this could be anything from like, does your timeline make sense? Are you trying to lead a 4-hour workshop for a 6-year-old, are you, what are you trying to do with your project, and does your budget make sense? Does your audience make sense? Does a program that you're proposing, is it feasible? And of course, we will prioritize our equity deserving groups as well. Okay, and now we'll take a little bit of a deep dive into the application itself. What's in the application? It has an eligibility screening on the first page. It has your contact information, of course, because we need to know who's applying and how to contact you. It has a section for you to input information about your workshop. And then it also has a section for you to share a little bit about yourself, your artistic background, experience teaching, and upload some program material. So I'm going to go into another screen right now. I'll just bring up the web page. Okay, so this is the landing page on our website for this program. This is where you'll find the program guidelines, which is what we were just going through in the slides. You can click there to read those out in a big PDF format. This is the application deadline as a reminder. This is the info session that we're at right now. So I'm going to click into the application. So our application is a jot form, and it's really simple. You just put in all your info here. Starts off with a little bit of a background about the project. It also links to program guidelines again, in case you need it. While you're looking through this application, if you feel like you might need some help or support filling out the application, or if you have questions, you can email me, or you can email info@bramptonartsorg.ca, and we'll be happy to help you. But the first page here is really just the eligibility screening. So before you can even proceed to the rest of the application, you'll need to identify as either an individual artist or a group, either a collective or a local org. So for example, if I were to fill this out, I'd say I'm an individual artist. And then you'll need to complete this eligibility screening. So all of those criteria that we talked about earlier, you'll need to select here before going forward. So you'll need to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, 18 or older, currently based in Brampton, have demonstrated experience leading workshops, and you'll need to select that you'll provide a votable sector check. If you don't select all of these, because if for some reason one of these is untrue or doesn't apply to you, it won't actually let you proceed with the application. So it'll give you this message that says, unfortunately, you don't match the necessary requirements. And if you're unsure about that or you want to talk about it, please feel free to email me. We just put that there because the application is quite long, and we need to make sure that folks meet all of those criteria before moving forward. But it doesn't mean that if you get this message, it's like a hard no. It just means that maybe we need to talk through an eligibility criteria before moving on. Okay, so let's say that I meet all these criteria. I'm going to the next page. We'll go through this together. So this is your contact name, is pretty standard. Your legal name, your artist name. You can enter your pronouns if you like. We'll need an email address to contact you, as well as a phone number. This is voluntary, but you can self-identify. If any of these resonate with you, you can check off multiple, or you can also prefer not to answer. And then we move into the project information. So is there a title for your project, the grade that you're looking to work with, the number of students that you're looking to work with per session, and then a description of what you're going to offer. So exactly like kind of like that snippet of what Cameron shared during his proposal, you're looking at sharing that information with some more detail and really getting down to like the basics and like clear details of what you're offering. So you don't need to provide like background or anything like that, just like who, what, where, when, why. It's like a really like helpful way to think of it. And Cameron, if you have any suggestions there as well, just like really getting down to exactly what's happening, how you're delivering the project, what you're delivering in this section here. You might have other folks that you're going to work with. Perhaps you're going to bring in another artist. We asked for you to include their name here and their info. And of course, these should be folks that are aware that you're including them in your application. So you can list that info here if you have any. If not, you can just put NA. How many workshops are you going to deliver? So like we said, it could be a one-off engagement, or perhaps you're going into a school 3 times. So you can let us know here. The length of each engagement and workshop, you can describe or tell us here. And then your proposed workshop date. So we understand these might not be confirmed because you're still maybe in conversation with teachers, but it helps for us to have an idea of when these workshops will take place, especially looking at the timeline for the project and its feasibility. Project venue. So are you going to a school? Are you leading this program online or off-site? And where it would be taking place. So you could say like, I just need a school classroom. Cameron was saying he needs an open space. So maybe that looks like a gym, could look like a stage. So put that information in here as well as over here. So this is more specific requirements for schools. And it just helps us to understand, once again, the feasibility of the project. So are you saying like, I'd like to do this in a classroom, but I need access to like 10 sinks? Like that might not make a lot of sense, but that's really where or why we're asking for this info here, is to make sure that the project is feasible for a school. And it also helps you just plan and think through what you might need to make your program happen. Similar to facility requirements, is there any equipment that you would need from a school? Once again, related to feasibility. Are you asking for lots of materials, or you're just asking for, or sorry, lots of equipment, or just asking for like a couple of things? It just helps to think through that process and list them all out here. A proposed budget for your activity, and there's a slide in the presentation that we can go through. But really, you're looking at including things like your artist fees, material costs for things that you're going to purchase, transportation for yourself to and from the school. You can include that here. You can also include your vulnerable sector check fees, because we know that you have to have those in order to go to school, into school. So you're welcome to include that in your budget. And you can also include your insurance. And we'd just like to see this like itemized in like a really simple chart. And that would be your budget there. And then we go into your artist info. So your biography or your organization's information here. Headshot or logo, a website if you have, or social media links that might be relevant. And then some information on really your experience teaching or facilitating school programs. So we really want to know, as we mentioned, that artists going into these programs have experience leading workshops for schools. And that's, once again, just because we don't have, as Val, we won't be attending these programs, and we won't have a lot of oversight once you lead it. It's really the artist project. And related to that, you can show us some of your previous examples of workshops. You could send us, you could add pictures, you could add resumes, testimonials from students or teachers you can include here in the supporting materials section. So you'll need to include at least one, but you have the option to include at least 3 different files, and it's up to you what you'd like to include, as long as they are relevant to your application and the program that you're presenting. And I won't click next because I haven't filled out all of these things, and it'll make me do that before going forward. But once you've filled out all of these sections and the ones with the stars, which are all mandatory, you'll click next and it'll take you to a signing page, which just says like, I acknowledge that all of the information here is true and correct, and you just sign it, and then your application is submitted. And you'll also get an email confirming that we've received your application, and it'll also be a copy of everything that you submitted. So you'll be able to see all your answers here. And that's it, really. I'm going to go back to our presentation. But that's the application in a nutshell. Like Cameron said, it's very close to the OAC grant application. So, you know, you could definitely repurpose. And honestly, a lot of schools have, I know the Peel Board has the approved vendors list, which is something you might consider applying for and getting onto as well. And it's honestly, it's a very similar application. So once you've done it once, you probably already have a lot of this writing prepared already. Breaking it down, I mean, I won't go over this for too long because we're just at 1 o'clock, but always in all of your writing, just be clear and concise. Always try to stick to the word count that we suggested. It really helps the panel understand quickly what you're trying to do. Like we mentioned, your project budget is up to $1,500. I mean, you could go over, but understanding that BAL will be able to provide only $1,500. You can include your artist fees, insurance, materials, your vulnerable sector check fees, and your transportation to and from workshops. There's a very simple sample budget there for, this is a writing workshop, for example. So you have your artist fee at a rate of $400 per day times 2 days. Perhaps you're spending $250 on notebooks and pencils and materials for the students. You have a event insurance that you'll be providing, you'll need for going into schools. You have your fee for vulnerable sector check, and I haven't, please don't quote me on any of these numbers. Obviously, I'm sure that you have received or searched these things before, but these were just estimates. And then your transportation to and from school, which is like a pretty general rule of thumb for 60 cents per kilometer. And so everything together comes to just over 1,000, so $1,195 as an example budget. We went over this in the application as well, but once again, when describing your experience and work, just be as clear as possible. Always make sure that the information that you're sharing is like really relating to the program that you're proposing. So if you're going to propose a program for like very young audiences, 6 to 7-year-olds, you know, you might want to talk about experience teaching very young audiences, or show us examples of support material that relate to programming for young audiences. Yeah, and this kind of just goes over the same info that we looked at in the application, just regarding your support materials. Just make sure that connects to your program. And it's a nice way to show us that you have connections to schools, you have experience teaching as well. And last but not least, we'll end off on this slide. So these are just some things to consider if you're accepted, or perhaps even when you're thinking through writing your proposal. So you might want to consider a contract. I think, Cameron, you briefly touched on this, and in your communication with teachers, you might want to put together a contract to confirm your program dates, your venues, your supplies, support. So it is helpful to say teacher must remain in classroom, because on some occasions, they might head out. Or maybe, it's also a really good space to say that, you would like some parent volunteer support. So, would require 2 volunteers to be present. And that's for the school to provide. Or it's just a good way to, and a good place to make sure that all your bases are covered. So consider writing a contract, perhaps. You might also look into school board presenter policies. So certain boards, the Peel board has one, and more, maybe Laura, you can talk a little bit about this, but you'll need to be on a presenters list in order to go into a school. There may be other policies and procedures that you'll need to go through before actually entering schools. You might want to consider photo release policies and necessary forms. So usually the school will be able to provide you information on that. So whoever you're working with, you can reach out to the teacher to understand the photo release and media release policies. Consider adaptations to meet diverse access needs in classrooms. So similarly related to what Cameron is talking about, make sure that you're really meeting students where they're at. Consider how you would adapt a program for someone else in the space. Will you need volunteers or additional support? So like I said, that could be you bringing in a volunteer. Considering, do they also have a vulnerable sector check? All of these things need to be considered. But thinking through what you might need or the support you might need to deliver your program. Of course, always safety of materials, thinking about allergies, especially for young students. A lot of schools and spaces have a no nut policy. Even something as simple as that is good to be aware of. And of course, where will you source your materials? So thinking about how many students you're going to serve, where might it make the most sense to get your materials, and what materials will you be using? Those are just some things, but I'm sure we're going to unpack many more in our Q&A period. So before we jump into that, like I said, if you have any questions or about the application, or you need any assistance, you can reach out to me. My email is just amanda@bramptonartsorg.ca. You could direct message us, but realistically, we can't answer questions properly through our DM. Although Gardenia tries, bless her, she's very good. But yes, please reach out by email. And then once you submit your application, this says it'll take up to 2 months to hear back, but it'll actually take probably a couple of weeks. Artists will hear back by September 6th, I believe, and then accepted artists will have a chance to meet each other. We'll have a little orientation, I suppose, just for folks to get to know each other. And then everyone can jump into their programs. Yeah, and we are looking forward to hearing your ideas. Honestly, just hearing Cameron's, I was I'm so excited. Because I'm sure that everyone in this meeting has amazing ideas to put forth, and everyone is bringing their own skills and experience to this program. So I'm really excited to launch this program with all of you. And yeah, let's jump into questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So we'll do some questions. Maybe we'll just bounce back and forth from the chat to folks on the video. Sophia, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if we were going to hear from Laura. Did I miss that?
No, that's a great question. So Laura didn't have a section that she was going to present
Oh,
on per
okay.
se, but if you had some questions for Laura, now would be like a really good time to reach out. Did you have any like school related questions?
No, I used to work at the school board, so I don't.
You know it well.
I thought that Laura was gonna have some because I haven't been in the board for a couple years.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, actually about being on the vendors list, I don't know if Laura could speak to this, but I find that like being on the list doesn't really how does that translate with actually getting into classrooms?
Mm.
Because I am on the list, but I still go one-on-one, like I have to connect with a teacher or a principal or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that, being not an administrator, but a classroom teacher. And just starting to understand myself how the program works and not realizing that Brampton wasn't really advertising this to schools, that it's up to the artists to connect with schools. And I'm kind of thinking that probably contacting our arts coordinator at the board would be a really great idea, because Bobby is really great at sending out lists of artists and workshops to K to 12 teachers. We have like the art teachers are all on a distribution list as well. So I think contacting Bobby Dorka would be really great. Like, in fact, I'm thinking I would contact her and say, hey, did you know that this is going on? Because this is a really good opportunity, and maybe we can get together a list of everybody that gets approved for the project, and she could send that out to the art teachers that are on the distribution list. And by art, I don't just mean visual arts, like I mean arts within school, and then it'll spread from there. So that would be, I think, a really good way to get this project into schools. Keeping in mind that Peel is also Mississauga, right? So it's not just Brampton. So we would need to be specific with that, but I would be happy to reach out with her and talk to her about that.
Okay, you said Bobby Dorka.
Yeah.
So it's
And
BBI and DORKA.
I will check and put it in the chat.
yeah, and we have been in conversation with Bobby about this program too. So she's and she is wonderful. She's like doing all the arts programming for like Peel, the Peel board. So she's a good contact. Okay, I'm gonna look through the chat. Okay, we kind of answered that question. If we bring in other artists, would they have to have their own vulnerable sector check? Yes, I believe so. And I think Laura, you might be able to confirm this, but anyone coming in needs to have a vulnerable sector check that's up to date.
My husband's just giving me some feedback here, because he's also a high school teacher with Peel, and he says it depends for the amount of time you're working with the students, whether or not you need it. But if you have it, it makes the whole process much easier and much more smooth.
Amy's asking, should we already be talking to schools about the possibility of doing these workshops? I would say yes, why not? It's really good to just build those relationships, I think, because even if you didn't have this funding for whatever reason, now they understand more about like the work that you do, and like schools also have funding for experiential learning, and could definitely bring you in just as a presenter, independent of this program.
Yeah, and if I can add, Amanda, I think especially if you're from Brampton and live in Brampton, start by just connecting to the schools directly in your area and say, hey, I'm a professional artist. I live in your area. This is what I offer. Teachers love that when they can, and especially if it's a school you're connected to, you're a graduate from or an alumni of. They love when they can bring back students who past students or people who are in their area, and they can say, look, this person lives up the street, this person walked this hall, and now they're a professional artist and now they're teaching you. So that might be your way in, whether you get approved or not, to start looking at which schools you're interested in going to.
Yeah, we meet so many artists in the community that are like, I used to go to that school and now I'm like doing a workshop there. That's such a smart, it's a good way to approach it. Keep working down the list. Do we get to choose the school and grade? Yes, it's totally up to you. When you design your program, who you want to, or the grade that you want to work with, and the school that you'd like to work with. Is there any time? Oh, sorry, I should say as long as it's a Brampton school, and as long as it's an elementary or high school. Is there a time limit on the workshops? I would say no, but you're looking at your, I'll speak from Bao's perspective, sorry, in the program perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Laura because I think you probably have a lot of great insight on this question. I would say like consider the fees that you have, so how much you want to spend on like your hours, and your artist fees. Like if there is a limited budget of 1,500, so that's something to consider when thinking about time. I think an artist fee for CARFAC is $500 for 4 hours or less, so that's something to just keep in mind. So just make sure that you're paying yourself fairly. Thinking about, you know, school scheduling and limitations, and then also like the grade that you're working with, like what makes sense for different what do you call it, attention spans, right? Like yeah, you could try a 2-hour workshop for like a 7-year-old, but then you got to build in those like food breaks and the recess breaks and all of that good stuff. So just keeping that in mind when you're planning. And I'll turn it over to Laura, who might have some more.
Well, you got to kind of work with the school's timetable, right? So that will depend if they have nutrition breaks, recess, lunch, how long their periods are. So you need to talk to the school and the teacher, and sort of figure out what it is. A lot of schools will have like a 40-minute long period for each subject, but then if they're bringing in a presenter, they'll just, you know, book a double or even a triple block for you to present in, depending on what the school's timetable is. And unfortunately, there are many different timetable models in Peel. So the schools are all going to be different. The school I work at, we have 60-minute periods. So you have to work with the teacher that you connect with, or the principal, and sort that out. And then, yeah, obviously the younger the kids, the less time you're going to be able to engage their attention before they're kind of done and hungry and needing a break. So keeping that in mind. I see there's also a question about numbers of students in classrooms. If you're interested in working with kindergarten kids, you're looking at 30+ kids in one class. It's very busy. There will be a teacher and an ECE in the room, so you'll have 2 adults in there with you. Grade 1, 2, and 3 are capped at 20 students in the class, but they could be like up to 23. And then 4 to 8, it could be anywhere from 24 to 30 kids, depending. And I feel like often what I see in schools is if a teacher books a workshop for their grade 5 class, they would like to have the workshop for all the grade 5 classes in the school, because it's not very fair for just one class to have a workshop. So a size of school like mine, we have, for example, 4 grade 5 classes at my school. So would you want to go into each class at once, or do you want to group 2 classes together, or how would you work around that? Because at a big school like that, I know they'd like to cover the whole grade. Probably a smaller school, they might just have 1 class per grade or 2 classes per grade. So that's another thing to consider when you're looking at a school. And then also really consider that there are a lot of needs in schools right now, in Brampton schools. So your audience you're probably looking at students with ASD, students who are nonverbal, students in walkers and in wheelchairs and with behavioral needs. And we're doing our very best to make sure that all students are included in all activities. So another thing that you would want to connect with the teachers you're working with and find out about the needs that there are in that classroom, so that your workshop's accessible for all of those kids, that they can participate. And then I also see a question about specific topics or focuses. I'm just finding that kids are just really interested in anything you can bring. Like, they love having guests in. They're just hungry to learn about anything. I mean, I would love to bring some digital art into my room. I just don't have the tech. I have no tech in my room, so that makes it quite challenging. And I'm not sure that you're going to be coming in there with like 20 iPads or something like that. We have carts that we can sign out. So that's another thing, you know, check with the teacher what they can make available for you. Often there's stuff teachers can sign out. So if they have advance notice, you'd be surprised what we could get together and make work, right? So I really think it's good to connect with the school, specific school you're interested in, and find out like how they can help you, because the teacher's gonna, if they want you in there, they're gonna try and make it work the best for you possible, right?
I would just add on back to time limits, because I mostly work in high schools. The time limits in high schools are very rigid. So unlike in elementary schools where they can be more flexible, once the bell goes in high school, and the students they don't care whether you're still talking or not, they're out of the door. So double check with the teacher how long the period is, because every school is different. Sometimes it's an hour and 15 minutes. Sometimes it's like a weird, like 56 minutes or something like that. So, so yeah, just be aware of that. And again, working in high school, they're often trickling in late, and they're, like I said, they're leaving right on the bell. So account for some flexible time in the beginning too.
And yeah, this question about specialized classes, there are very few specialized classes left in our board in K-8. So you'll find that students are included in all of our classrooms. We have a lot of sensory rooms available where students can go when they need that time. But yeah, you'll find that all our students are pretty well integrated.
With the students being integrated, and I know for kindergarten there are ECEs, but would there be the support, their EAs that would be also?
Hopefully, we have quite a shortage of EAs right now. So we're often sharing EAs between many students. I would think that, you know, I know for myself, if I knew we had a workshop coming in, I would make sure that we had support available for sure for those times. Yeah, we do have support, but it is thin right now, unfortunately. But yeah, there would definitely be support. Just think about accessibility more for kids. So your job wouldn't be to specifically support the student that maybe is in a wheelchair, but making sure that there's an entry point. Like, if I taught 2 students in chairs that didn't have the use of their hands, so I taught them visual arts. So how can I make it accessible to them? And I would need to know about their needs. And I think that when you present to whatever your idea is to the school or the teacher, that should be the teacher's job to say to you, hey, this is what's in my classroom. These are the needs of the student, and how can we probably together make that accessible? It wouldn't be on you. But I'm just trying to let you know the teachers will probably say, hey, by the way, we do have X number of needs in our classroom. Just be aware that will, if you're working in elementary, for sure, you're going to see that's coming up.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Okay, we still have about 9 minutes left if anyone else has any more questions.
Sorry, I have a question about the deadline. Is it a strict deadline? Like, if you miss the deadline, then that's too bad, so sad, or is there any flexibility?
But yeah, we try to stick to our deadlines, but if there's some like circumstance, something that happens and you need more time, just like send us an email. We'll see. We can help you out. Yeah, and you don't have to have like your school confirmed or anything. It's just mostly hearing about your project and what you'd like to propose. Like, we don't expect anyone, it's the summertime. Laura, you can probably talk to this, but like teachers don't go back for maybe like another week. They go back in August, but like they're not thinking right now about bringing someone in. They'll probably start to do that work in like September. I feel like there's some rearranging that happens with like teachers and classes at the start of the year.
Yeah, we have what we call a reorganization day in Peel, which has gotten later and later in September. So it's usually not till the third week of September. So what happens if we have classes that are really overfilled or classes that are underfilled, they sort of rework the entire organization of the school, and you could create split grades, get rid of split grades, kids change classes, teachers are declared excess, more teachers need to be hired. It's like a kind of a big shuffle. So I wouldn't anticipate that teachers would be booking anything until that reorganization day has passed, just because the organization of the classes might change. But teachers are definitely thinking about booking things like right away in September. So it'd be good to have that information out there as they can start looking at it and thinking about what's going to work.
Well, I have a question about the amount of artists. Like, is there a limit of individuals who will be selected? Is there a cap?
I would say that we're aiming to support 6 projects, like 6 artists at least. But I think like we're flexible if we're like there are more. 6. Yes, I know. It's like small, it's baby right now because it's just our first year trying this program, right? And I think like if it's like a huge success and like it goes really well, and we learned like all these good things from it, then like I think we could definitely expand it next year. But just because it's our first time doing this, we're also like slowly building connections with schools. Like I'm so grateful to have met Laura and her partner too, just through a Pixel exhibition, right? So like we're slowly like making these connections ourselves. And this is like part of that work, and we're really grateful to like launch such a great program where we get to work with artists and schools. But yeah, just 6 for now. But if I don't know, let's say we're going through these applications, we're like, wow, they're actually like 8 amazing projects and we have the budget. Like, yeah, we'd love to do that. Question in the chat, do you have to know the name of the artist you want to work with in the application? I would say yes, because this is for your program that you're proposing. I would say yes. It would be helpful, and you should know the name of the artist that you'd like to work with, and hopefully they know that they're part of the application. They need to know that they're part of the application when you submit. Any other questions? I'll leave some space for people to think. Okay, well, maybe if that's all for today, we'll sign off now. I'll put my email in the chat box if you have any other questions. Feel free to reach out. And if it's like very specific and related to schools, I'm sure. Oh, Laura, So sweet. I was about to say I can reach out to Laura, but thank you so much. Oh, what a great contact here, everyone. Laura has put her email in the chat. If you have any questions about working with schools, she's a really good contact to have there. Thank you both Laura and Cameron for being here today and all your support on this project, and for sharing your experience today. I think it really added a lot. And yeah, I'm really grateful to both of you for being here, and to all the artists joining us today. Oh, Giovanni, one more question before we end. If someone does not have experience with workshops with schools, volunteers, I mean, I think you could volunteer with other artists. I think that wouldn't be something that BOW could facilitate because we won't be sending volunteers or staff into these programs. But if you know an artist in the community that you'd like to work with, I think that's a great opportunity to learn and to gain experience. Yeah, it's a really good idea. And then you just go in as like a collaborator or a volunteer. Nice. All right, folks. Okay, I am going to end this recording.